It is an honor to introduce such an amazing group of experts in the field of education. I know each of you has a program which really outlines their bios, so I'll be very brief so we can continue on. So, at the end, Bill Dinger, he's president of Sadlier Publishing. Pola Rosen, she's founder of Education Update. Ann Tisch, founder of Young Women's Leadership Network. Jay Russell, the head of the Windward School in White Plains, New York, a language-based disability school. And also Jennifer Raab, president of Hunter College. Without further ado, I will have Margaret continue. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Margaret Grace, and welcome to all of you. Margaret Grace, there isn't really enough I can say about Margaret Grace. She has been enthusiastic, encouraging, and tireless in her efforts to develop this educational forum, and I'm most grateful for your friendship and support, Margaret. Thank you. I also want to say thank you to William Mcbride, one of the Grace Outreach board members, and all of the board members who have been so supportive. To Andrew Rubinson, Executive Director of Grace Outreach, Ed.D, and all of the wonderful Grace Outreach staff. Thank you for all your efforts. Special thanks to Dr. Pola Rosen for her extraordinary efforts in developing this. And thanks to all of you for being here so bright and early this morning. Some of my family and friends are here, including my own mother, Matilda Margaret Cuomo, my dear friends, Kathy Ray, McBride, and Silver, and William Held. Thank you. And we're especially grateful to our honored guests who are our panelists today. We are going to engage in some enlightening conversation about current issues in education. There is nothing more important to our nation as a whole than education. And we know that we're hearing a lot about a term called global competence. Global competence is a 21st century initiative that refers to the international awareness, appreciation of cultural diversity, proficiency in languages other than English, and competitive skills. And at this time, I'm going to ask some general questions that the entire panel can answer, and then there will be specific questions that relate to the areas of expertise of each panelist. When we ask the specific questions, we'll use alphabetical order. So now, panelists, the $4.35 billion Race to the Top Fund is the federal government's initiative to stimulate educational reform. And the Race to the Top state competition is designed to reward states for leadership in establishing what we say, quote, comprehensive, coherent, statewide educational reform in 4 key areas. First, adopting standards and assessments that will prepare students for success in college and the workplace. Second, building data systems that measure student growth and success and will inform teachers and principals how to improve education. Third, recruiting, developing, and rewarding effective teachers and principals, especially where they're needed most. And 4, turning around the lowest performing schools. The adoption of the state-led Common Core Standards for English language arts and math is a cornerstone of this new educational reform. And it's hoped that soon there'll be Common Core Standards for science and other subjects as well. And so, panelists, I ask you, what is your view of Race to the Top? Do you think that this is an effective strategy for stimulating educational reform nationally? And do you think that the Common Core Standards will help to improve the quality of education nationally? So I ask you, that's a general question, and anyone can answer.
I'll start. First, I think that any focus on education on a national conversation is important, and for that reason alone, Race to the Top is a positive thing. I think it's really led to some important conversations in New York, so I want to make 2 points about that. The first is the focus on competition in the system and breaking up the way business as usual. So our application in New York State for Race to the Top led the state to finally raise the cap on charters from 200 to 400. That was extraordinary. I'm not someone who believes charters are the only answer to our educational problem, but they're clearly having a level of success. And if it took Race to the Top to get New York State to have that conversation to allow us to have more charters, then it's a very positive thing. A second point, which is very near to my work as the head of one of the best education schools in the state, in the I think, in the country, is the focus on teachers and evaluating teachers through the use of data. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more this morning, but it's a very interesting direction that the country, the national policymakers, have pushed us in. And what they're asking us to do in Race to the Top is actually use student performance data. How did the students do on tests to evaluate the teachers? And a question for me as somebody who proudly produces teachers is, how do we do that? And is that actually effective? Is it fair? Is it useful? So there are people who believe you can do a regression analysis, excuse me, and say that this class had this performance on tests, and the teacher is responsible for that performance, not the socioeconomic conditions, not the principal, not all the other things that happen in a child's life. So the question is, how effectively can we do that if we're going to evaluate teachers and their performance based on student performance on tests? So I think it's a very complicated conversation. I think it's a very good conversation, and we've entered into an experiment with DOE to actually look at how Hunter graduates fare in that way. What are the performance of students taught by Hunter teachers? But I still come back to that question of, is that still a fair reflection of the teacher who is not responsible, obviously, for all the conditions, and can you isolate? And I guess the last point to that is something I'm sure we'll discuss this morning also, is I think we've sometimes moved, and I think Race to the Top has done this a little bit, and it's unfortunate, into a climate of teacher bashing, that the education problems are somehow, it's all the responsibility of teachers. And I think we all know, and I certainly know, because I am graduating thousands of phenomenal human beings who are pouring their hearts and their skills into classrooms every day. And I have